He slammed the door behind him, the golden handle rattling in his hand. Alexander Crane, the billionaire with a fortune that could buy nations, laughed loudly, a deep, mocking sound that echoed through his sprawling penthouse. $1 million? He scoffed, tossing the check onto the table. You want me to pay this much to be healed? That's rich, literally. His voice boomed, dripping with arrogance and disbelief. The crowd of doctors and onlookers exchanged uneasy glances. Most were used to wealth, yes, but not someone who treated their own suffering as a game. In the corner, a boy no older than 13 stood with calm eyes that glimmered in the afternoon sunlight. His skin was dark, smooth, the kind of deep brown that reminded some of polished mahogany. He didn't flinch at the billionaire's roar. He didn't even raise an eyebrow. Instead, he studied Alexander quietly, arms folded over his chest, a soft but steady smile playing at the edges of his lips. The room seemed to shrink around him. Every expensive chair, every abstract painting, every gilded ornament faded into the background. The billionaire's mocking laughter became a dull echo as all eyes were drawn to the boy. "Do you even understand the condition you're in?" Alexander barked, striding forward, his designer shoes clicking against the marble floor. "Do you have any idea what years of doctors, medicine, and specialists have tried and failed to do? And you come here asking for a mere $1 million, thinking you can heal me in seconds?" He waved his arms, spilling the contents of his expensive drink onto the floor, the liquid hissing as it met the marble. "It's laughable." The boy shifted slightly, placing a small hand on the wooden floor. There was no hesitation, no fear, just a quiet confidence that made everyone in the room tense. "I'm not here to make you laugh, sir," he said softly, his voice calm but commanding. "I'm here to heal you." Alexander froze for a fraction of a second, a flicker of disbelief crossing his sharp features. The boy's accent was subtle, smooth, hinting at a remote village far from the city's chaos. Yet there was something in that accent, in the calm, almost imperceptible certainty in the boy's voice that made Alexander's arrogance waver, just a little. "Heal me? In seconds?" Alexander's laugh returned, a short, incredulous bark that bounced off the walls. "You must be kidding. Do you even know what's wrong with me? Heart condition, chronic pain, circulatory issues. You think a child—" He stopped, noticing the way the boy's dark eyes didn't blink, didn't falter. It was almost as if the boy knew. A nurse stepped forward, glancing nervously at the boy, whispering to Alexander, "Sir, maybe we should—" "Quiet!" Alexander snapped. "I don't need advice from anyone. I need results." His chest rose and fell rapidly. Every vein, every sinew of tension in his body screamed that he was accustomed to control. And yet in this moment, the boy commanded the room. The boy stepped closer. His movements were deliberate but fluid. Every eye in the room followed him, the anticipation thick enough to choke on. "Place your hand over your chest, sir," he instructed softly. "Breathe slowly. Focus on your body, not your wealth, not your power. Just listen and feel." Alexander's brows furrowed, irritation flaring. "Listen? I don't listen to children, boy. I own people. I own results. You think I'm going to—" He cut himself off, startled as a strange warmth began to flow through his chest. It was subtle at first, almost imperceptible, like the sun brushing against chilled skin. What is this?" Alexander whispered, his voice now mixed with confusion and curiosity. He dropped the condescending tone. He watched as the boy knelt slightly, placing both hands lightly near his chest, not touching, just hovering. Alexander felt his heartbeat slow, the pain dulling in a way no medication had ever done. "Concentrate," the boy said simply. "Don't fight it." Alexander's breaths came in shallow gasps. The pain he had grown accustomed to, the chronic ache that had followed him for years, softened. It was surreal, almost unreal. He looked at the boy, then at the doctors, all of whom were now frozen in disbelief. Machines, medicine, and money had failed him, but this boy, standing quietly in a simple shirt and worn shoes, was doing what no one else could. One doctor muttered, barely audible, "How is this possible?" Alexander clenched his fists, trying to assert control over the situation. "Stop! Stop this nonsense! I don't want—" His words faltered. His body wouldn't cooperate. The ache he had lived with for a decade, the very pain that had been his reality, that he had used to command fear and respect, was disappearing. Every nerve, every muscle, every throb was calming, aligning, as if some invisible conductor was orchestrating the symphony of his body. The boy's eyes met his. "Healing doesn't come from money, sir. It comes from understanding, from balance, from faith in what can't always be seen." Alexander's pride wavered. Every second felt like an eternity compressed into a heartbeat. He wanted to scoff, to dismiss it as coincidence, but he couldn't. Then, almost imperceptibly, Alexander felt a shift, not just in his body, but in his mind. His racing thoughts slowed. The panic that had always accompanied his illness, the anxiety that had driven his empire building, started to ebb. For the first time in years, he felt free. The room went silent. Doctors dropped their charts. Nurses froze mid-step. The air itself seemed charged, as if electricity had drawn every particle to witness the impossible. Alexander finally spoke, voice low, trembling, stripped of its usual arrogance. How did you—" The boy's lips curled into a faint smile. "I listened, sir. I felt where your body was blocked. I didn't need wealth or machines, just attention, care, and focus. You can do the rest." Alexander sank into a chair, his head in his hands. No words could capture the shock, the humility, the awe. The audience in the room, the doctors who had laughed at his challenges, now stared at the boy with reverence. Some whispered prayers, others shook their heads. $1 million, Alexander muttered under his breath, almost in disbelief. I don't know what to say." The boy simply stood, folding his hands calmly, radiating a quiet confidence. "You don't need to say anything. Healing isn't about payment." Alexander's ego, so large and commanding, felt strangely small. He wanted to argue, to assert himself, to reclaim control. But he couldn't. Not here, not now, not after this. He looked at the boy, really looked for the first time. This child, dark-skinned, eyes steady and knowing, had given him what no doctor, no fortune, no technology could. In that instant, Alexander realized that wealth had bought him influence, power, comfort, but it had never bought him freedom from himself. The billionaire's chest rose and fell steadily. The ache, the chronic pain, even the fear he had carried for years, all gone, and in its place, a strange foreign sensation of gratitude and humility took root. He exhaled slowly, a long, shuddering breath. I don't know how to repay you," he admitted, "but I feel alive, for the first time in years." The boy nodded once, almost imperceptibly. "Let your actions now be your gratitude. Use what you have wisely. Change how you live. Help others, not just yourself." Alexander swallowed, his eyes glossy, catching the sunlight through the large windows. For a moment he felt small, human, vulnerable, and it was liberating. Everyone leave the room," Alexander whispered finally, voice rough with emotion. "I need to understand this. Alone with him." The doors closed. Silence wrapped around the two figures, the boy and the billionaire. No money, no cameras, no audience. Just two souls, one teaching, one learning. Alexander's hands trembled as he reached out, but the boy gently raised his own, stopping him. "Focus on you. Let the healing continue within. You already have it." Alexander felt a warmth bloom in his chest, spreading outward. Tears welled up unbidden, a strange, humbling sensation for a man who had rarely felt powerless. I don't know what to call this, he whispered. Call it life, sir, the boy replied softly, and let it teach you. Alexander nodded slowly, each word heavy with meaning. I will. I promise. I'll live differently. The boy smiled, serene, steady, a beacon of calm in the whirlwind that had been Alexander Crane's life. In seconds, the billionaire had been healed, not just in body, but in spirit. And in that room, a lesson was learned. One that no money could buy, no doctor could teach, and no empire could impose. Alexander sat in stunned silence, the boy's calm presence beside him a stark contrast to the storm of his emotions. For years, he had believed that money, power, and influence were the keys to life. Yet here he was, humbled, healed, and utterly powerless to explain what had just happened. You need to teach me, Alexander finally whispered, voice still quivering. I need to understand what you did, how you did it, everything. The boy tilted his head slightly, considering. Healing isn't about control. It's about awareness, about feeling what's hidden in the body. Anyone can learn it, but it requires patience, humility, and focus. Not money, not arrogance. Alexander's fists clenched, a flash of frustration crossing his features. I've built empires, commanded armies of people, changed markets with a single decision. And you, just a boy, stand here and tell me I need humility? Yes, the boy said simply, unwavering. Until you understand that, you will never truly be free from pain. You may have wealth, but not life. Not truly. Alexander's chest heaved. He wanted to argue, to assert dominance, but every word caught in his throat. The pain in his chest had vanished, leaving him feeling exposed, vulnerable, and, dare he admit it, grateful. It was a sensation alien to him. The boy's eyes met his, steady and unwavering. You have two choices now, sir. Continue as before, ignoring the lesson, or take this opportunity to change, to truly live, not just survive. Alexander swallowed hard, tears pricking his eyes. He had never felt like this, not even in the moments of greatest triumph. I want to change. I want to learn. I want to live. The boy nodded once. Then we begin. The following weeks were a whirlwind. Alexander's assistants and doctors expected him to resume his empire building, to flaunt his wealth and power. Yet something had shifted. He began to ask questions he had never asked before, about health, about mindfulness, about listening to the body. At first, the doctors were skeptical, some even mocking his new obsession with a boy's teachings. Sir, one muttered, this is a child. How can you take medical advice from someone with no training, no credentials? Alexander's response was simple, almost reverent. Because he healed me when nothing else could. Each day he spent hours with the boy. The sessions were quiet at first, meditative. The boy would guide Alexander to focus on his breathing, to feel the flow of blood through his veins, to notice tension in muscles he had never been aware of. Alexander, ever the control freak, struggled at first, wanting results immediately. But the boy's patience was endless. One afternoon, Alexander asked, frustrated, "Why are you so calm? Don't you feel pressure? Don't you want recognition?" The boy shook his head. I don't seek wealth or praise. My purpose is simple, to help. That's all. Alexander leaned back, trying to absorb the lesson. It was difficult, this surrender. A man who had controlled the fates of thousands now had to control nothing. And yet, slowly, he began to feel the change. One morning, Alexander noticed a strange warmth in his chest as he walked through his office. It wasn't the boy's presence this time. It was the flow of life he had ignored for years. He felt clarity, focus, and a sense of peace that had eluded him even in moments of triumph. Word of Alexander's miraculous recovery spread quickly. Business magnates, journalists, and social media influencers clamored for interviews, eager to know how the billionaire had healed so suddenly. Yet Alexander, transformed, remained silent on specifics, refusing to exploit the boy or the method for fame or money. One evening, as he stood on his penthouse balcony overlooking the city, a reporter approached. "Mr. Crane, people are saying a young boy healed you in seconds. Is that true?" Alexander exhaled, watching the city lights flicker like stars. "It is true, but it's not the boy. It's the understanding, the awareness, the humility to recognize that life isn't controlled by money, but by how we listen, to ourselves and to others." The reporter's pen hovered over the notebook, unsure how to capture the essence of what the billionaire was saying. Alexander's words were not just about healing, they were about transformation. Back at the boy's modest apartment on the outskirts of the city, the community had noticed a change as well. Alexander began investing in local clinics, funding education programs, and creating initiatives for health awareness. It wasn't charity for publicity. He genuinely wanted to give back, to honor the lesson he had learned from the boy who had changed his life. Neighbors whispered about the billionaire's unexpected generosity. Children stared wide-eyed at the cars that pulled up, but Alexander walked through the streets with humility, shaking hands, listening, engaging. He was no longer untouchable, no longer distant. He was human, and he was learning what it meant to truly live. Meanwhile, the boy continued his quiet work. No accolades, no fame, no desire for wealth, just the steady act of healing those in need, quietly, efficiently, compassionately. Alexander often visited, but he no longer demanded attention. He learned from a child who had nothing yet gave everything. One evening, after a long session, Alexander turned to the boy. "I owe you everything, literally everything." The boy smiled faintly. "You owe me nothing, sir. You owe yourself. Remember, healing isn't just physical. It's spiritual, emotional. It's about the choices you make." Alexander nodded. The lesson sank deep into his bones. He realized that his life had been rich in money, yes, but poor in purpose. That had changed. The billionaire, once consumed by power, had found clarity, gratitude, and a new mission. "People will want to know who you are," Alexander said. "They will want to exploit this story." The boy shook his head. "Let them. They will not understand, and that's okay. Some things are not meant for everyone." Alexander smiled, a genuine, unguarded smile. "Then I will keep your secret, and in return, I will live differently. I promise." Weeks turned to months. Alexander maintained a rigorous practice with the boy, learning to listen to his body, to meditate, and to approach life with humility. Every milestone, every moment of insight, every small act of kindness reinforced the transformation he had undergone. Once, in the middle of a board meeting, a sharp pain began to rise in his chest, a reminder of the condition that had haunted him for years. But instead of panicking, he paused. He inhaled, focused, and felt the blocked pathways open once more. The pain faded. Relief washed over him, a sensation he had never experienced in corporate boardrooms or luxury offices. The board members stared, unsure of what had just happened. Alexander simply smiled, a secret smile, and continued the meeting, calm, composed, and transformed. At home, Maria noticed the change first. The man who had once been consumed by stress, anger, and frustration was patient, calm, and attentive. Conversations with Alexander were now filled with empathy, understanding, and reflection. Their home, once tense with the billionaire's volatile moods, became a place of warmth, laughter, and genuine connection. "You're different," Maria said one night, watching Alexander prepare dinner. "It's amazing." Alexander nodded, chopping vegetables slowly, deliberately. "I've learned something important. Money can buy comfort, but it can't buy life. It can't buy understanding or humility or peace. I've had to learn that the hard way." Maria smiled, reaching out to touch his arm. "And the boy? The one who healed you?" Alexander exhaled slowly, a mixture of gratitude and awe in his eyes. "He taught me what no doctor, no medication, no fortune ever could. He reminded me that the simplest acts, the quietest knowledge, can change a life in seconds." Days later, Alexander returned to the boy's community. He didn't bring cameras, reporters, or gifts. He walked quietly, a humbled man, carrying nothing but respect and gratitude. The boy greeted him with the same calm demeanor, hands folded, eyes steady. "You've returned," he said simply. "I have," Alexander replied, bowing slightly, a gesture of respect he had never shown anyone before. "I've come to continue learning and to give back, as I should have all along." The boy nodded. "Then let's begin." Alexander followed the boy into the modest healing space, a small room lined with soft mats and simple instruments, sunlight streaming through the windows. He felt an unfamiliar calm, almost reverence, as he observed the way the boy moved, placing his hands gently on a volunteer's shoulders, adjusting posture, whispering subtle instructions. "Today, we focus on energy," the boy said softly, turning to Alexander. "Feeling it, understanding it, channeling it. You will learn, but you must let go of fear, let go of pride, let go of expectation." Alexander nodded, swallowing his impatience. "I'll try," he said quietly. The word itself felt strange on his tongue. Trying, rather than conquering. The boy guided him through breathing exercises, subtle manipulations, and meditation. Alexander struggled at first, his mind racing with skepticism and disbelief. But slowly, he began to notice sensations, warmth in his chest, tingling in his fingers, a rhythmic pulse in his body. It was as if life itself was flowing in a new, coherent pattern he had never experienced. "You feel it?" the boy asked, eyes calm, unwavering. "Yes," Alexander whispered, astonished. I feel it." The boy smiled faintly. "Good. Now, use that feeling to connect with another person. Focus your intent on helping them, not controlling them. Healing is a gift, not a transaction." Alexander's gaze dropped. "I've spent my life trying to control, to buy, to command. I never realized how blind I was." The boy shook his head slightly. "Many are. The lesson comes when it must." That evening, a wealthy philanthropist arrived at Alexander's office, seeking guidance for a complex heart condition. Alexander felt a rush of fear. His old instinct was to order tests, prescribe medications, call specialists. But now, under the boy's guidance, he paused. He inhaled, closed his eyes, and focused on the subtle vibrations in the man's body. Minutes passed. The philanthropist's breathing slowed, his tension melted away, and a warmth radiated from his chest. Alexander opened his eyes to see the man's astonished face. What did you do?" the man asked, disbelief etched in every line. Alexander smiled quietly. "I didn't do anything. I listened. I helped the body find what it had lost." Word spread. People whispered about the billionaire who had been healed by a boy, and now healed others with his hands, his intent, his focus. Skeptics questioned him. Journalists tried to capture the secret. But Alexander and the boy remained elusive, protecting the method, preserving the integrity of the knowledge. One afternoon, as Alexander walked home, he found himself reflecting on the past. Memories of surgeries, failed treatments, and decades of stress flooded back. He realized how fragile life truly was. In his hands, he held wealth, influence, and power. but those had never guaranteed him freedom from pain. Only understanding, humility, and awareness had. He arrived at the boys' community, greeted by the warm smiles of neighbors and children. Alexander knelt beside them, teaching small exercises under the boys' guidance. Laughter echoed, energy pulsed, and the billionaire, who had once been feared for his ruthlessness, now became a source of inspiration and hope. "You've changed him," one parent said quietly to the boy. "He's different." The boy nodded. Healing isn't just about the body. It's about the heart, the mind, the soul. He needed guidance, not medicine. Weeks later, an unexpected challenge arrived. A young child from a nearby village, gravely ill, was brought to the boy. Doctors had given up hope, declaring the case untreatable. Alexander, though still learning, felt the fear rising, memories of his own mortality haunting him. "Can we help him?" Alexander asked, voice tight. The boy looked at him calmly. "We can. But remember, focus, patience, humility. You cannot impose your will here. Only presence, only intent." Alexander nodded, swallowing his panic. Together they worked through the night. Alexander watched closely, learning to feel, to sense subtle shifts in energy, to guide the child's body toward balance. Hours passed. Exhaustion pressed in from all sides, but the boy remained steady, calm, a beacon of quiet assurance. And then, slowly, a miracle occurred. The child's breathing steadied. Color returned to pale cheeks. Eyes, once dull, now sparkled with life. Alexander felt tears well in his own eyes. He had witnessed healing not as a consumer of wealth, but as a participant in something greater than himself. As dawn broke, Alexander and the boy sat quietly. Alexander's hands trembled, heart racing with gratitude and humility. I can't believe this. I never thought—" The boy placed a hand on his shoulder. "You doubted because you feared. Healing requires trust, not doubt. Control, not fear. Humility, not arrogance." Alexander nodded, voice breaking. "I understand now. I finally understand." The boy smiled faintly. "Good. But remember, this is only the beginning. True healing is continuous. You will stumble. You will falter. But you will also grow." Alexander exhaled, feeling a weight lift. He looked out at the horizon, realizing that his empire, his wealth, his power, they were not meaningless, but they were tools, not life itself. He now understood what mattered: connection, understanding, empathy, and the courage to let go of control. Back in his luxurious office, Alexander implemented sweeping changes. Corporate policies shifted to prioritize employee well-being. Investments flowed toward education, health, and community development. He no longer measured success in dollars, but in lives improved, in impact made. Even his closest business rivals noticed the change. A former adversary remarked, "He's different, calmer, more deliberate, more human. I don't know what he's done, but it's remarkable." Alexander smiled quietly, knowing the truth. He had been healed by a boy, and in the process, his own heart had been transformed. As the story of the billionaire and the boy circulated quietly, more people sought guidance, but Alexander and the boy were selective. Not everyone was ready. Not everyone could receive what they offered without arrogance or expectation. One evening, Alexander reflected on the journey. From the scorned, skeptical millionaire demanding healing for $1 million, he had become a man transformed, humble, grateful, and alive in ways money could never buy. He looked at the boy who was quietly observing a new student. "I will never forget this," Alexander whispered. The boy simply nodded. "You don't forget lessons learned with the heart, not the mind." Alexander exhaled, feeling a quiet peace he had never known. The city lights shimmered below, but now he saw them differently. Not as markers of conquest or wealth, but as part of a vast, interconnected world he was finally ready to be a part of. The sun had just risen when Alexander received word of another emergency. A young man, severely injured in a construction accident, was brought to the boy. Alexander's first instinct was to panic. The memory of the previous child's near miracle weighed on him, reminding him how delicate this process was. "Are you ready?" the boy asked calmly, his eyes steady, unwavering. Alexander nodded, swallowing hard. I think so." The room was quiet, almost sacred. The young man lay on the mat, unconscious, limbs bruised and twisted. Alexander felt the familiar fear rise, but he focused, remembering every lesson: humility, patience, intent, and presence. The boy placed his hands lightly on the young man's chest, his voice a whisper of guidance. "Energy follows intent. Feel it. Do not force it." Alexander mimicked the motion, his hands hovering, trembling slightly. He felt warmth, subtle vibrations, and a rhythm beneath the surface of panic and pain. He exhaled, allowing himself to let go, to trust the process rather than control it. Minutes passed like hours. Alexander's mind raced, doubting, questioning, fearing failure, and then, slowly, he felt it. The unmistakable pulse of life responding, aligning with the intent of care. The young man's chest rose more steadily, his fingers twitched, and his eyes fluttered open. The room seemed to exhale with him. Alexander's knees gave way, and he sank beside the boy, overwhelmed by relief and astonishment. "It worked. It really worked," he whispered, tears streaking his face. The boy simply nodded, serene. "Healing is a dance between life and attention, between the seen and unseen. You've learned much, Alexander. Remember, humility and gratitude are the true powers." Alexander's gaze softened. He realized how far he had come, from a man who scoffed at miracles, who laughed at the idea that someone could heal him for $1 million, to someone who had witnessed them firsthand and participated in creating them. Back at his penthouse, Alexander reflected on the journey. The city below glittered, but his heart felt light, connected to a world far larger than wealth, ego, or fear. He knew his life had changed irreversibly. The boy had not only healed bodies, but had awakened hearts, teaching lessons Alexander had never learned in boardrooms or through contracts. Maria, who had been observing his transformation from a distance, approached him. "You've changed," she said quietly. "I've never seen you like this, calm, patient, human." Alexander smiled faintly, a rare softness in his eyes. "I've been shown something far more valuable than money or power: empathy, humility, understanding, life itself." Maria reached out and they stood together in silence, the city's chaos a distant hum, insignificant compared to the quiet revolution of heart and soul happening within him. The boy continued his work, quietly teaching Alexander and a few selected students. His methods were simple yet profound, blending intuition, energy awareness, and deep observation. Alexander, once a man of laughter and scorn, now approached each day with reverence, knowing that every life touched, every subtle vibration felt, was a gift beyond price. One evening, as Alexander walked through the community garden established with his resources, he overheard children laughing, volunteers teaching, and people sharing in the joy of connection. He stopped, watching the boy demonstrate gentle healing techniques to a small group. "You've changed everything," Alexander said softly. The boy looked up, a faint, knowing smile crossing his face. "No, you changed yourself. That is all that matters. Healing begins within." Alexander exhaled, a deep, cleansing breath. He felt gratitude so strong it brought tears to his eyes. The journey that began with arrogance, a challenge, and skepticism had transformed him into a man of insight, compassion, and true power, the kind that money could never buy. Weeks turned into months. Alexander's empire shifted focus, funding health initiatives, education programs, and community wellness projects. The story of a billionaire healed by a boy became a quiet legend, shared in whispers, inspiring those ready to listen. Yet Alexander never boasted. He knew that real transformation was internal, invisible to most, but palpable to those touched by intent and care. One day, as Alexander sat quietly, reflecting, the boy approached him. "You've learned well," he said. "But remember, the path of healing is endless. Pride can undo all you've gained. Stay humble, stay present, stay connected." Alexander nodded, understanding deeply. "I will. Thank you for showing me what life really means." The boy's smile was faint but radiant. "It was always within you. I merely helped you see it." As the story closes, Alexander looks out over the city one last time, not as a ruler of wealth, but as a man awakened. His hands, once used to command and control, now understood touch, connection, and intention. His heart, once locked behind ego and pride, now beat in rhythm with life itself. He thinks back to that first day, when he laughed at the idea of being healed by a boy for $1 million. How blind he had been, how narrow his view of life and power had been. And now he smiles, fully aware that the true riches of life are not bought. They are felt, shared, and lived. Alexander turns, seeing the boy quietly tending to a new student. He nods, a gesture of respect, gratitude, and acknowledgement. "I will never forget this," Alexander whispers. The boy simply nods, serene. "Good. But remember, the journey is ongoing. Keep walking with your heart open." Alexander exhales, feeling a profound sense of peace and purpose. He walks forward, ready to live fully, to lead with compassion, and to share the lessons of humility and healing with the world. And if you're still watching this story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Your engagement helps this channel continue sharing breathtaking, life-changing stories. Some miracles don't come from money, power, or fame. They come from the unexpected, the humble, the unassuming, the heart open to possibility. And that is the true lesson Alexander learned, that wealth can buy comfort, but it is the heart that creates transformation.